Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's Uprise webinar, Effective Communication with me, Nigel Polak. Thank you for being here. Can you just say hi in the chat to confirm hi, to confirm that you can hear me and that we are connected? Great. Yeah, we did have some audio issues behind the scenes and I can't hear anything from the other side, but hopefully you can all hear me. Yay. Hi. Okay. So I'm stalling a little bit, but I won't stall too much. Effective communication. The numbers are creeping up in our session today. Hopefully, well, I'm assuming you're here because you want to communicate more effectively, and you're hoping that I'm going to be able to provide you with some information and advice that will actually help you to do that. You might be someone who's struggled with communication. You might be someone who is having issues in relationships at work or at home or elsewhere. You might be someone who is in a communications role and you're interested in getting another perspective. You might be interested in how how you do your role better and understanding how communication plays into that. Firstly, this is part of communication, isn't it, in Australia nowadays? I would like to acknowledge the Gumbaynggirr peoples upon whose country I am currently sitting and acknowledging them as the traditional custodians of these lands upon which I'm meeting you today. And I'm paying my respects to their elders past, present and emerging, and my gratitude for their ongoing custodianship of this country for so many countless generations before any white man was even aware that this land existed. And a warm welcome to any Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander people who are with us here today. So my name's Nigel. I'm what we call a psychological coach at Uprise. I'm not a psychologist. I'm a psychotherapist and counsellor. I also happen to have qualifications in business management and process engineering and law. And some of my insights around communication come from that engineering type background around what works in organisations, and also from the law and how the law uses clear communication and relies upon clear communication in order to do its role in our society. I'd love to hear from you. Please use the chat. I think we've got a chat. Yeah. I'd love to hear your questions. I'd love for you to focus. I haven't got much interaction in this webinar, but what I want to hear from you is kind of why you're here, what you're interested in. And as we go along, if any question pops into your head, just pop it into the chat. I may not get to it straight away, but I will see everything that comes into the chat, and I will be able to respond, and I will be able to tailor my message to what it is that you're wanting and needing from this session. So, without divulging any personal details of anyone, and even if you do, I won't. You can be quite specific and direct about the questions that you might have around communications. Okay, yes, you'll get a recording sent to your email address, and you will get a feedback form that will put a link to a feedback form posted in the chat towards the end of the session. So please, just before we close, click the link, and then even after the session's closed, you'll be able to fill in that feedback form. And of course, that's very, very helpful to us in how we deliver future webinars. Okay, so what are we going to cover today? First of all, we're going to start with what we mean by communication, and that's hopefully my communication will be effective. I'll be modeling effective communication, because the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to frame our conversation. What I'm doing right now is I'm clarifying the expectations that you can have about the things that I'm going to talk about, and that clarification of expectations we'll come back to. You'll see the fourth point there. Then I'm going to talk about the contexts in which you communicate, in which we all communicate, and to sort of break those places and spaces up so that we are clear about what kind of communication you're thinking about. I'll be talking about communication generally. I'll be providing some specific examples, but I know that in your head you're going to be thinking more specifically, and I want you to start to actually really quite clearly compartmentalize about where what when, where, how you're communicating, so you can tailor and frame your communications for specific spaces and purposes, contexts and purposes. We're going to be looking at the outcomes, and that's about expectation, but it's also about goals. It's also about ambitions. It's about intentions, and often these go unspoken. So we'll talk about, what are you hoping for from your communication? What are you trying to achieve? And we'll talk about how important that is in terms of what, when, how, and with whom you communicate. We'll touch then on topics of expectations, boundaries, assertiveness, and the role that these concepts play in effective communications. And then we'll wrap it all up at the end with a kind of a quick formula of effective communication in the way that we've framed it in today's session. I haven't received any specific queries in the chat yet, so hopefully they will come as we go along. So what do we mean by communication? I started off with this slide by going to the dictionary and saying, okay, what does the dictionary say? I can't even remember what it said, but I thought, you know what, that's not what we're talking about. I thought, okay, I had to take a step back. What are we really talking about? What we're talking about in this webinar is about how any one of us can express what we want, what we need, what's important to us, what we value in a engagement with another person or other people, plural, towards an outcome that's satisfying for us primarily. So, I'm focused on the communicator. Yes, the other person's going to be important, but I am focusing, at least for the first part of the webinar, on the communicator and getting what they want, getting what they need, getting their needs and wants satisfied by the way that they're communicating, because that's what's going to make the communication effective. So think about the context, think about the different spaces in which you're communicating. When are you communicating? Where are you communicating? Why are you communicating? With whom are you communicating? So the when is it before work, after work, during work? Is it on the way to somewhere? Is it in an emergency? Is it in a crisis situation? Is it is it at the beginning of the year, at the end of the financial year? There's all sorts of when components we might consider. Where is probably the biggest one in terms of context. Is it at work? Is it at home? Is it in a social environment? Is it on a webinar like this one? Where are you communicating? And why? What's your purpose? What's your goal? What's the intention? What's your purpose, goal, intention? But also, what's the purpose, goal, intention of the context? Why does this context exist? Why are you even invited and included in this context? What's your role in the workplace? What's the role? Not necessarily what's your role in the workplace. What's the role of the workplace? What's the purpose of your organization? How does your family see its purpose? How does your group of friends that you're socializing with, how do they see their purpose? What are they doing? Are you on a pub crawl? Are you out to dinner? Are you in a nightclub? What are you trying to achieve? And with whom are you communicating? Is it somebody who's an equal to you? Is it somebody that you have authority over, like a parent to a child, or a manager to a staff member? Or is it somebody that has authority over you? So a child talking to a parent, and that goes in many cultures. It doesn't matter how old that child parent is, that power imbalance always remains the same. If you're an employee speaking to your manager, if you're an employee speaking to someone even more senior than the organization to you, and outside of kind of clear organizational authoritative constructs, how are you perceiving yourself in relation to the other person? Are you perceiving yourself as less powerful, more powerful, inferior, superior? What's your sense of yourself in that relationship? And we can then get curious about what's their sense of themselves in that relationship. I don't think I quite got into the why, but we'll get into that in more detail in a moment in terms of the purpose of your communications and what it is that you're trying to achieve, and specifically what are your wants and needs. That's what we'll do here. What's the outcome that you want? This is the why. You're having a conversation because you've got a purpose. This is the way all organisms work. We have a sense of something internal, usually, that we want, that we need, that we feel is necessary or beneficial to our evolution, development, growth, And then we use our senses to seek out the satisfaction of that want or need from our environment. So this is why we're communicating every single time. We're wanting something from our environment, and we're using our communication to try and get that thing that we want, to get a satisfaction of that want or need. So in any communication, you can ask yourself, what do I need? What do I want? What am I trying to get out of this communication? And behind that, why do I want it? Why do I need it? I always think in these situations, I always think of kids and sugar, or kids and video games. They're like, I really want the sugar. I really want the sugar. I really need the sugar. My kids are like, I really need time on playing my video game with my friends online. And if I don't get it, the whole world is going to explode and I'm going to fall in a puddle on the floor. So asking themselves, well, why do you want or need that? What is that actually giving you? That kind of informs your intention, and getting clear on your intentions is so powerful in communications. Anytime anyone goes into any kind of, because people often ask me in the work that I do with clients, about how they should go into specific situations like job interviews, like negotiations about pay with their bosses, about difficult conflictual situations, about performance management conversations, and asking this question: what do you need? What do you want? Why do you want it? Why do you need it? Why is that important to you in this context? And then what are the consequences for you and for others if you don't get what you need? That it will also inform the why, because you can start to think about, okay, if I don't get this, if this doesn't happen, what are the domino effects? What are the flow-on effects? How does this going to impact upon me? And then how is this going to impact upon others around me? For instance, if I don't effectively performance manage this staff member, then that will affect their teammates, that will affect the team's performance. Then when our team is looked at in broader organizational reviews, we'll all look bad, and that will have consequences for all of our future opportunities in the organization and our income. So those consequences are quite serious, and so there's a real import in making sure that that this conversation goes well. So this is sort of jumping straight to the point. Some of you might have been at the boundaries webinar. Maybe just give me a nod or a wave, or say, yep, if you're at the boundaries, setting boundaries webinar. I think it was last month or the month before. A lot of people really, really valued that webinar. And here's kind of the quick insight from that webinar, which is boundaries, which you'll hear people talk about. And the reason I have developed an understanding of this is because I was studying psychotherapy, and people were talking about boundaries. And I was just like, what are you talking about? I'm like, I'm not even sure that you guys know what you're talking about when you use this language. And so I did a research. I did a master's research paper going, okay, well, what are boundaries? What do people mean? And I was like, oh, they're talking about expectations. So every time you have an expectation, and this is the quick version, I've run like 3 or 4 hour workshops where people have started going, oh, that's too simple. That's not what a boundary is. And then by the end they're going, oh my God, you're right. Boundaries are an expectation. And again, it's from this biological level where we create an expectation in our mind, and that expectation in our mind sets up a perceptual cue, a readiness to experience a perceptual cue, like a radar, like a human radar, where if that boundary isn't met, then we become aware of it and our body gets activated and we become anxious, we become enlivened, we become energized, and that is designed to get us to do something about that breach of that boundary. We're not aware of boundaries, interestingly, until they're breached. We're not even aware of our expectations until they're not met. And even then, all we become aware of is a feeling. Very rarely are we you didn't meet my expectations because of this, this, and this. No, we have a feeling first of irritation, frustration, annoyance, anxiety, fear sometimes, that in response to our expectations not being met. And then it takes time to go, what on earth is this feeling about? So boundaries, expectations, clearly setting boundaries, clearly setting expectations is what assertiveness is about. Assertiveness is being able to say, here is my boundary. Yeah, I expect this from you, and I expect that from you, and I expect this from me, and I expect that from me. And when you don't do this, this will be the consequence. So really good parenting. Assertiveness is parenting 101. It's about saying these are the rules, these are the guidelines, this is my expectation, and this is the consequence if you don't meet my expectation. I'm going to keep moving through because I'm aware that with each side, I'm going, oh, each slide, there's so much that I can unpack. Okay. Oh, that's the same slide repeated with a different picture that I forgot to delete. Okay. Expectations, boundaries, and assertiveness. So in the workplace, the emphasis, this is much more about workplace, but the same principle applies in the family and in social context. I really struggled for a long time in social context because the rules are really unclear. There's no set rules for how you're supposed to behave. You know, they're very implicit, and I really struggled with that. I do much better with sort of explicit rules. So I'm kind of happy in a workplace, happy in a professional role, but put me in a social situation, and I'm like, oh, how am I supposed to engage here? In the workplace, where expectations and boundaries are seen is in clear policies, clear procedures, clear accountability structures, clear position descriptions that are all relevant to the context in which you're operating. They clearly add to the why of the organization as a whole, the reason why we are all coming together, being paid to spend a good portion of our lives doing whatever is we're doing, and having that all set out clearly makes organizational life so much easier and prevents so many difficulties in communications. If you've ever worked in a new team or a poorly structured environment where there's no policy procedures, I was involved in setting up some organizations, no policies, no procedures, and people just constantly bumping into one another because there was no clarity about what to expect from other people, what my role was, what your role was. This word role, on top of boundaries, expectations, the next level is role, because depending upon what role you're taking in any situation, in any part of your life, you will adopt a different set of expectations based upon that role, and that will determine your boundaries in that particular engagement, relationship, and that will also then determine how you respond to the other person. So with starting point, role clarity, what's your role in that relational context? And then the next thing is, what's your capacity for one, honest emotional expression? How good are you at actually going, this is how I feel, this is what's going on for me? Because this, how I feel, a lot of people discount feelings, like feelings aren't important. Feelings tell us when somebody's breached our boundaries. Feelings tell us when our expectations aren't being met. Very, very primal organismic level. So how good are you at saying, this is what I feel and this is why I feel it? That's one. Number two, when it comes to boundaries being breached and feeling threatened, having a fight-flight response, how good are you at emotional self-regulation? What's your capacity to go, breathe, ground myself? I've got just noticing my toes. I'm standing on my toes and I can put my feet on the floor, ground myself. I can notice myself getting elevated. I can feel my body on the chair. I can feel my feet on the ground. I can grab onto the table. You can hear me banging the table, and that gives me a sense of solidity, which provides emotional regulation. Do you have those skills? All right, I'm going to whiz now. So the 3 steps to clarifying your boundaries and expectation is, what's the context? What's your role in relation to other people in that context? And what are your expectations of yourself and others within your role? So once you've done that, you can be bang on, absolutely clear on what your boundaries and expectations are in that particular relational context. In order to set clear and consistent boundaries, effective communication is just about being clear. I want, I need, and expect. That's the starting point. You start from yourself. This is what I want. This is what I need. This is what I expect from you. And if the other person isn't clear, you can use examples like, well, you could do this and you could do that. You should do this. You should do that. You must do this and you must do that. And then having clear and consistent consequences, being able to say, okay, this is what I want, this is what I need, this is what I expect. You could do it this way, you should do it this way, you must do it this way. And then otherwise, this will be the result, this will be the consequences. Again, work, home, any other space in which you're operating, these principles apply. This is the kind of the template for this kind of effective communication when you've set the expectations. Sometimes you haven't set the expectations. So whether you've set the expectations or you haven't set the expectations, considered communication, also sometimes called Marshall Rosenberg's nonviolent communication, or NVC, It's the same. There's a bunch of different names for this that you find in the corporate world, but also in the self-help and psychology world. And it's tried and true. And I use it in my couples therapy a lot. And it's to say, okay, so you've identified the thing that's happened, which is usually somebody's crossed your fence line, your boundary line. I feel disappointed. I feel hurt. I feel upset. I feel sad. I feel frustrated. I feel annoyed. I feel angry. That's the honest emotional communication. And then make a request. Now, depending upon the role and the context, that request will come out differently. If you're in an intimate partner relationship, you'll try and be as respectful as possible and say, look, I would be really grateful if you could do this. If you're in a managerial role, you're more likely to say, look, I feel like you're not, when you don't show up on time, I feel like you're not a part of the team, and that's upsetting to me because having a team environment where everyone's pulling their weight is important to me. I really need you to be here on time, and if you're not on time 3 more times in a row, then these will be the consequences. Be prepared to do what's necessary. This is really interesting point. People go, well, hang on, what do you mean avoid, escape, escalate or conflict, invite a higher authority to intervene? When you're in a conflict situation, these are your options. Yeah, you've been activated, you've got fight, flight, somebody's breached your boundaries. Maybe you've asked them to respect you and your space and your expectations, and they've just become angry or they've escalated. Your options are quite literally get out of Dodge, leave. 2, escalate the conflict. Yeah, start raising your voice, up the ante. Even start being aggressive. This is what a lot of people do. Number 3, you go and you get another manager. So if you're having a conflict with your manager, where do you go? You go to HR, or you go to the manager's manager. I have trouble with people who have conflict with the CEO, and they're like, I've got conflict with the CEO. Where do I go? It's like, if you got a board, okay, sure, but if the board doesn't give me what I want, what do I do? What's the higher authority after that? It's called the law. Yeah, and it's called courts. And at this stage, there's a whole bunch of you going, oh, I don't want to go there. But this is where we go back to being prepared to do what's necessary. Because if in a communication that gets to a high conflict point, if you are prepared, not that you will, not that you have to, not that you should, but if you're prepared to go to the level that you need to have your rights respected, to have your boundaries respected, to have yourself respected, then that's where you get your strength from. If you're scared at any point, if you're scared of not being liked, if you're scared of not being seen as tough enough or good enough, if you're scared of losing that promotional opportunity, if you're scared of going to a lawyer, if you're scared of going to court, then you're already retreating. Your expectations are moving back. Yeah, and you're giving into that other person because you fear their greater power and authority. But if you're prepared to do what's necessary, that's where you get your power back in difficult communications. Ooh, looking at the time. Okay, so now we're going from the communicator side to effective communication by incorporating what's going on for the other person. So let's really focus in now on understanding the other person's wants and needs. I'm just noticing almost at the end, and the chat has just been silent. So I'm hoping that you're soaking this up rather than going, what's he on about? Okay, so understanding of the person's wants and needs, so important. There's 2 levels here that I want to focus on. One is active listening, pretty simple skill. Hard to do in reality, but the skill itself is super simple. And then we're going to add to active listening the magic of empathy. Now, empathy is magic. If you want to score some goals and really nail stuff in any relationship with your kids, with your spouse, with your new girlfriend or boyfriend, with your manager, with your employees, with your colleagues, with your staff, with the clients that you're working with, empathy is the magic. All right. So active listening. How do we do active listening? I do active listening all day, all long for my profession. It's the 80%. There's an 80-20 rule. Counseling, psychotherapy, hopefully psychology. I can't talk for them, but it should be active listening. Yeah. Just listen. Park your own thoughts and feelings just for a minute. Hopefully you've said, this is how I feel. This is what I would like from you. Now shut up, listen, park your feelings. Hear, what do they talk about? Like rabbit ears. Listen to what the other person is saying. You've got to shove your own stuff to the side so that you can really hear what the other person's saying. Repeat it back. So you haven't heard the other person until they've heard you hear them. So you need to repeat it back. Listen closely as they clarify, because chances are you got it wrong. Why? Because you're a human being. You live inside one body, one brain, and you see the world through one set of eyes. And if you think about that, it's like being on a high-rise building or on a ship and looking at the porthole window or looking at the window of the high-rise and going, oh, I can see the world. No, you can't. You cannot see the world. You can see one tiny slice of the world. That's it. And getting that perspective out of the way is tough. Listen closely as they clarify. Repeat back again their clarification. Repeat that process until the other person says, you've got it. That's it. Yes, that's what I'm trying to say. And they go quiet, and their need to be heard is satisfied. You can add to this. You can add to active listening by using your imagination to imagine yourself in their shoes. Given what you know about them, their family life, their role in the organization, the things that they've been dealing with in their job, the things that they've been dealing with in their life, the kind of person that they are, their cultural background, anything that you know about them, put it all together and go, okay, what's it going to, imagine yourself in their shoes. What's it going to be like to be them having that experience in this conversation with me? Oh, now that I've put myself there, I can imagine what that person will think and feel. We all have this capacity. They say that maybe like 0.01% of people who are psychopaths may not have this capacity. I think that's even doubtful because they can use it to their own manipulative ends. But we can imagine how other people think and feel and then share this with the people. Sometimes people say, I can't do that because I can't know how another person feels. Well, guess what? You can. You can know how another person feels. Give it a go. Take the risk, because you know what? They are going to love that you've tried. Yeah, it's like magic. It's like magic healing balm. I mean, most of, I would say 80-20. Now I'm up to 95%. 95% of the healing that I do is through pure empathy. It's magic. All right. So now we've got to the end. Could you please post the link to the feedback, Teresa? All right. So that was a bit of a roller coaster. But this is what we've got. Putting it all together. Effective communication is about honest, assertive self-expression, being able to state with clarity your own boundaries and expectations. Then it's about empathic understanding. So if you have honest, assertive self-expression on the outgoing side, and then you receive, and then you turn that into empathic understanding, then what you get is you get a mutual respect for self and other. They know where you stand, and you know what's going on for them. You know where they stand and why they stand there. And then you're in a space where you're able to work together collaboratively to meet one another's needs. Okay, I need this, you need that. How do we then meet one another's needs? And you'll find that people very naturally, very instinctively, once they understand your needs and feel like you've understood their needs, people want to meet one another's needs. Unless, of course, they're the 0.01% that's a psychopath. Okay, that's it. Be clear about what you expect from other people and what they can expect from you. Practice active listening and experiment with empathy. Respect your own wants and needs. Be consistent. I haven't really touched on that consistency yet, but if you're consistent about your expression of your expectations, your wants and needs, and then you're consistent with your consequences, parents, parenting 101, be very, very clear about your expectations, be very clear about the consequences, and when the expectations aren't met, follow through with the consequences. That will make your life so much easier. And it builds trust. Yeah, people are like, oh, I don't want to be hard on my kids and I just want them to be happy. Let them be unhappy for a bit, because in the long term, you're going to have much happier kids and staff as well. All right. You can always use Uprise as a coaching and therapy service. If we are already your EAP, then book in an appointment. If you feel like anything that I've talked about here today or anything else is going on in your life that might benefit from the coaching, your organization's already paid for it, so you may as well use the sessions. And please provide the feedback. Thanks, everyone. Take care. Enjoy the rest of your day. And thanks for all the comments coming through. Really appreciate them.